So what we want to do is stop selling and start what? And how do we attract? What's our mission? Create value. If we create value, people will come to us. They'll want to work with us. They'll want to do business with us. Stop chasing and start attracting. And the way we do that is by creating value. Well, how do you create value? Well, what are people willing to pay money for? There's two things they're willing to pay money for. What will people, if the whole idea is how do you get people coming towards you, you got to have something of value. Well, you need to know how do you create value. You create value in one of two ways. What are people willing to pay money for? Service, knowledge, experience. Haven't heard the right answer. Those are all good. They like that. Results. Now we're starting to hear the ninjas come out. I heard it. Okay, they're willing to pay to solve a problem, to solve their pain. I have this problem. I live in Boulder. I've been transferred to San Diego. I need to get my house sold here. I need to get a house bought out there. I need to get my family moved. I'm willing to pay realtors large sums of money to help me what? Solve this problem. Okay? I'll pay money for that. What's the opposite of pain? I'm willing to pay money to feel good. I like to feel good. We have a whole economy built around feeling good. Look at the hospitality industry. Look at the resort industry. Look at the music industry. Look at the entertainment industry. Look at the sports industry. Look at how much money we spend. Trillions. Do we have to? Do we have to go to games? Do we have to go to movies? Do we have to go to entertainment? Don't have to, but we love to. Why? It's fun. It feels good. Okay? So if you can do anything that makes somebody feel good, they will be attracted to you. Okay? We'll talk about some specific ways to do that. Now, if this is what motivates them and this is what creates value for them, how do we discover their pain and pleasure? Ask them, right? Use what we call the Socratic method. Ask them questions and what? Listen. Now, it's called the Socratic method because it's named after who? Socrates. And what was his method of teaching? He was good at asking what? Questions. Now, there were two reasons why he liked to ask questions. One was it kept the attention of the student. When you ask somebody, if you ask a customer a question, they have to what? They have to respond and you stay connected. Okay? Socrates' other idea was that the answer lied within the student. And if he could ask the right questions and uncover that, the student would become what he called clear. Our philosophy is the answer lies within the customer. And if we can ask the right questions and help them to become clear, they will buy. In fact, what is it that keeps buyers from buying? If they see something that they want, that gives them pleasure, or it's something that solves their problem, they want to go for it, but there's something that holds them back, it usually comes out that they want to think about it. What's holding them back? They are not clear. There's two things holds them back. Either they're not clear or they're afraid. Okay? And so if we can help them to become clear and confident, they'll move forward. That's the basic idea. Now, it's one thing to know the right questions to ask, when to ask them, and in what sequence to ask them. It's another thing then to be a good what? Listener. See, we speak at 150 to 180 words a minute, but we listen at 400 to 500 times that fast. Okay, so we'll ask a question, then what? We're drifting off, and we're not listening. Okay, we're thinking about the next question we're going to ask. So really, this is a skill that's developed in how to ask the right questions, how to listen. Most salespeople, what? Talk too much. They don't ask enough questions, they talk too much. See, it's not what you say, it's what you ask. When we're talking, can we identify their pain and pleasure? No, we're just blasting away with our spiel, hoping that we hit on something that they might relate to. Okay? We're going to reorganize that. In fact, let's talk about the history of selling. You know, early selling was one step. It was a one-step process. What was that step? Anybody? Traditional sales process, one step. Closing. Closing. Close early, close often. ABC, always be closing. Know how to close. 10 closes to get your first yes. Right? 10 no's to get a yes. All this, close, close. Okay? Then we evolved. And we said, you know what? That's kind of depression-era selling. Maybe we should be a little more sophisticated. So we moved to a two-step process, which was, before you close, make a presentation of features and benefits. And then what? Close. Okay? And then we evolved into the 70s and 80s, and we said, you know, before you begin the sales process, what you should do first is what? Connect, build some rapport. Then present your features and benefits, and then what? Close. This is the sales process that most salespeople use. It's a three-step process. In fact, if you think of anybody that has sold you anything, they use a three-step process. I watch salespeople, real estate people, you know, they'll connect with that seller, and then they'll sit down and they say, okay, let me tell you about the market. Okay, let me tell you about our company. Let me tell you about my marketing plan. Let me tell you about myself. And away they go. And then at the end they'll say, well, what do you think? Okay? And I watch them with buyers, same way. Okay? It's all talk. And then a close. Now, the ninja sale process is very different. It's a four-step process. The first step is the same, connect. But once we've connected, then what we want to do is, instead of launching into our pitch, what we want to do is sit back and what? Begin to ask questions. Okay, tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me a little bit about what you're trying to accomplish. Okay? And identify pain and pleasure. Once we've identified pain and pleasure, then in our mind what we do is we formulate a solution, and we simply present what? The solution. We don't close. We simply present a solution. Now, let me give you an example. This is actually a commercial example. And by the way, Ninja, this works just as well in commercial real estate as in residential, but how many of you have heard of a women's clothing store by the name of BB? Show of hands. Most of the ladies are raising their hand, BB, okay? Some of the guys are raising their hand too, okay? But it's a women's clothing store. A couple of years ago, a large developer in northern Colorado by the name of Chad McQuinney, he has the Centera shopping center. And he was building that shopping center. It's about a 700,000 square foot center. And he said, he calls me up. He says, Larry, would you come over and help me meeting with the founder of BB and help me persuade him to put a store in the Centera shopping center? I said, sure, Chad, I'd be happy to. What do you want me to bring? And he says, well, bring all your stuff. Bring your statistics, your maps, you know, all the stuff that you have. You're really good at that, because he's going to want to know, you know, population, demographics, traffic counts, all this stuff. I said, great. So I come over. I'll never forget walking in Chad's conference room, and there sits this guy. He's a cool dude, man. He's tall, dark, handsome, all dressed in black. He's from San Francisco, dark hair, a little ponytail. You catch the picture? Well, he's just a cool guy. And sitting next to him is his vice president, who looks like a supermodel. And she's dressed to the nines, and these two beautiful people are sitting in this conference room looking out across the prairie saying, where are we? Where the hell are we? And, you know, and they're in Loveland, Colorado. And I'll never forget, we walk in, Chad, we're introduced, we connect, and we sit down, and Chad sets the table, and he says, I've asked Larry to come in and help us. I want him to show you the area, and I think when he's done, you'll agree that you should put a store here. Tosses the ball to me. Expecting me to what? Out with the map. Okay, here's I-25, here's Highway 34, here's Loveland, Fort Collins, Greeley, here's the households, here's the population, here's the demographics, here's the traffic counts, into my spiel, and then I would finish with my big close, which would be, well, do you have any questions? Typical sales presentation. Okay? I'm a ninja. Set the stage. I said, you know, sir, I've got quite a bit of information here, but, you know, before we go into that, you know, I'd like to hear your story. Could you take just a few minutes and tell me, how did you build this company? What was your vision? How did you start? You know, it was really interesting. Mr. Beebe was, I don't know if that's his name, I call him Mr. Beebe. He was kind of sitting back, you know, kind of disconnected, and the minute I ask about his story, he leans forward, and he's fully engaged. He says, Larry, let me tell you how it started. And he starts to lay it down. And I'm going, wow, what a great story. And I said, well, how many stores do you have now? And he says, we have X hundreds of stores. I said, well, how many stores do you have in Colorado? Tells, I forget how many. I said, well, when you decide to put a store someplace, what's your process? How do you do that? He says, well, it starts with an environmental scan. He says, my people go through, population, households, traffic counts, demographics, everything that's in my briefcase. His people have already seen. So how relevant am I going to be to start to go through that? And he says, if it looks good on paper, we do a site visit. And that's why we're here. We've been here for 2 days. And I said, well, what do you look for in a site visit? He says, we look for 2 things. I said, really, what are those 2 things? He says, the first thing we look for is we look for the women. I said, really, how do you do that? He says, well, yesterday we spent the whole day at the corner of Mountain and College in Fort Collins at Austin's restaurant, sitting outdoors, and we just watched women come down the sidewalk. I said, well, what do you look for? He says, we look for 2 things. At which point his vice president pulls out a sheet, and it just has a line down the middle, and her question is, that woman coming down the sidewalk right now, can she wear our clothes? Yes or no? Yes or no? And the second question is, that woman coming down the sidewalk right now, does it look like, based on how she's dressed, would she spend the money for our clothes? Yes or no? I said, that's fascinating. What have you found so far? He says, we like your women. I have found his what? His pleasure. We're doing good. And I said, well, is there any particular group of women that you like? And he says, well, what we notice is we do really well with Asian and Hispanic women. I said, well, that's interesting. Did you know that Greeley, Colorado is 35% Hispanic? He goes, I did not know that. That's the only document I pulled out of my briefcase, was the demographic profile for Weld County. I pulled it out. I showed him where it was. He took a big black felt tip pen. He circled that. And he says, how far is Greeley from this store? I said, about 20 minutes. He writes, 20 minutes, underlines. What else have I found? Pleasure. Now, so far we're looking pretty good, but he told me they look for 2 things, one of which was our women. I said, sir, what's the other thing you look for? He says, we look for your cows. I said, cows? He says, yeah. If we see a lot of cows, it tells us the area is too rural. And it's, it's not developed enough, and our stores don't do well in rural areas. He says, Larry, I got to tell you, on the way up here from the airport, man, did we see a lot of cows. I have found his what? Pain. He likes our women. He does not like our cows. So I figured, okay, now I've got to solve a problem. I said, so when you drove up here, how did you come up E470? And they look at each other like, where's E470? I said, was it a toll road? Oh, yeah, that's the one. That's the one. I said, well, that's a pretty new road. And, that's why it's not developed around there yet. That's why you saw all those cows. Will you do me a favor? When you drive back, don't go that way. Go down I-25 to I-70. I think you'll see that we're closer to Denver. We're more connected up to Denver. I guarantee you will not see as many cows. He says, you're on. And they left. And they put a store there. And the first year it was open, it was the #1 BB store in Colorado in sales per square foot to beat the Cherry Creek store. Okay? Now what's the point? Maybe they would have done the store anyway. Maybe I could have gone out with my maps and here's I-25 and here's 34 and blah, 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 blah. Do you have any questions? And maybe they would have bought it in spite of me. I don't know. But I don't think so. Okay? I think it's about asking questions, identifying what? Pain, pleasure, provide what? Solution.